Jedi Survivor hype has reached a head, and in this video we have even more details about the game, as game director of both Fallen Order and Survivor Stig Asmussen has recently sat down in an interview and discussed more details about Jedi Survivor that expand on what we saw in the gameplay trailer a couple weeks ago. So this gives us more information about what we can expect from Survivor in terms of gameplay, Cal Kestis himself, and some of this information absolutely changes this franchise forever, and it sounds awesome. So no beating around it, let's dive straight into it. All right, so Stig Asmussen, the game director of Jedi Survivor, has come out and revealed more about the game in an interview with Game Informer. Now, apologies, there will be some reciting articles here, then we'll dive into my thoughts on all of it. As Stig says here, we have 5 fully realized stances in the game. A lot of it depends on the enemy that you're coming across. It's advantageous to use certain types of stances against certain types of enemies, and it's up to the player to figure that out. It requires the player to break down the enemies and figure out what the best weapon of choice is. So there you have it. There will be 5 stances in Jedi Survivor, 5 different ways to approach how you take on enemies. One of those being the crossguard style as seen in the trailer. Stig goes on to explain it in more detail, saying it's a more confident approach, it's weighty, it's beefy, but you have to be very measured on how you use it because the timing windows are longer with the blade. Now, further in the article, they do go on to explain more about these stances, and this is where it gets really cool. As it says here, that there will be a stance that has Cal wielding a blaster and a lightsaber simultaneously. Now, note that we didn't see any blaster action in the gameplay trailer. We can only go off what we've seen in the game's promo art as well as toy leaks, but now this pretty much confirms that the option to use a blaster will be optional as one of the game's stances, as opposed to just being a sole base mechanic of the game. So this makes sense as to why we didn't see it in the gameplay trailer. So this is absolutely going to add some individuality as to how you want to play the game, which is a massive expansion on the first game. Now, this is what Stig had to say about Cal using a blaster. It really speaks to where we find Cal in this part of the story. It's 5 years since the first game and the dark times are still in full swing. He's an unconventional Jedi and he has to do unconventional things. So something that would be frowned upon during the height of the Jedi Order. Cal's finding he's going to do whatever it takes. So the vibe I've been getting for this game is that Cal is really going off the beaten path a little bit from what we'd expect from a Jedi. And this interview has basically solidified that notion for me. Now, the interview went on further discussing other details about the game, which this paragraph in this article states. There's a new gang of enemies Cal must contend against. We also know Cal is visiting a new planet in the Star Wars fiction, which Asmussen says will be a central proving ground and place of exploration, alongside visits to numerous other worlds. The action and visuals with some particularly impressive ray tracing look phenomenal. So that's interesting. Note that it talks about a new planet being a central proving ground. This to me seems like some sort of home base, I guess you could say, and then we'll be off visiting other planets and locations as we go along. I expect the home base planet, so to speak, would be this one from the trailer. Majority of the footage takes place here and it seems to be absolutely huge. So this may well be the planet we'll be spending a lot of time on. Now, on top of all of that, the new traversal mechanics were also discussed in this article, which is going to help expand on the exploration element of the game. And this is what Stig had to say. It's much of a wider Metroidvania approach. Cal can cross huge gaps by chaining several types of skills together, but it's also about how we approach these mounts and how they're used to negotiate and dominate the world. So this just basically confirms that we're going to have a lot of new ways to traverse what are bigger worlds than the first game. The traversal aspect of Jedi Fallen Order was not exactly a strong point. If anything, it was quite the opposite. Things were often very linear, so you kind of just had to follow the linear path to get from A to B. Some areas like the tombs on Zepho let things be a bit more open and you could get a bit more experimental with how you traverse the map. But mostly it was just running around or an occasional wall run. But for the most part, the map and the game's design kind of held your hand through a lot of the exploration. But that seems to be a bit of a thing of the past now. Now, as for the Bode character seen in the trailer, we get more of an insight on his influence in the game. As it says, he and Cal form a special bond. It's almost like they're brothers, and they're not exactly the same, but they really do complement each other. Beyond story considerations, Bode plays a role as a buddy AI character who aids in both combat and traversal. So this seems like it's just going to add even more variety to how we play the game. So in theory, it all sounds great, and it seems this game is not exactly going to become stale in the gameplay department. But overall, this was some really cool insight to Jedi Survivor. The more I am hearing about this game, the more I am starting to believe this game can actually top Fallen Order. Look, if it even matches how good Fallen Order was, I'd be really happy, but this thing seems to have the tools in place to exceed what came before in every conceivable way. So yeah, things are looking really good for Jedi Survivor. But guys, what do you think of these details? Let me know down in those comments below. This may actually be the last upload of 2022 as long as there is no breaking news. So I want to say thank you very much for another year here on YouTube. This was probably the toughest year yet in terms of just keeping content consistent due to the lack of games. But 2023 looks like it's going to be the biggest year in a long time for this IP and in turn, hopefully for this channel. So thank you very much for another year of support. Have a good holiday period and I'll see you guys in 2023.